Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. The 2021 NFL Draft is officially over, and the NFL has been at the forefront of the sports world conversations for the past, 5-6 days. A little bit of a different podcast, recording this on Monday. Just wanted the entire draft to finish first. I wanted to say congrats to everyone listening. We made it to Sunday. I know Kyle Shanahan said he didn't know who would be alive 2 weeks ago when he was discussing Jimmy G and the quarterback situation. So we made it. We made it to Sunday. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we made it to Sunday. So just wanted to shout out Kyle Shanahan for that. As always, follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football and go to our website at gsmcpodcast.com. Boy, what a crazy, crazy weekend we had in the NFL world. So much went down, both on Thursday for the first round, on Friday, Saturday, and then also just the news leading up to the draft was crazy. I've never seen so much NFL news come in. I just kept thinking I was getting duped by fake Twitter accounts that have Adam Schefter's avatar and username in, and I thought I was just getting tricked, but no, all the news was real. I'm going to get into all of that first, and then get into the first round of the draft and the second round of the draft as well. Going to go over all those picks, going to go over some later round picks that I liked, what teams did the best in the draft, what teams got new quarterbacks. We know the Jets, we know the 49ers, we know the Jaguars got a new quarterback, and then some surprise teams, the Chicago Bears. My Bears got a quarterback, and so did the New England Patriots. So I'm going to get into all of that. So much drama. I'm going to break down the top picks, or all of the picks in the first two rounds, give out some draft grades, get into my favorite picks, and then obviously, this is just a little silly because we don't know how good these players are going to be. We don't know. We won't know how good these draft classes are until a few years from now. But it's always fun to kind of just break down and get some instant reactions because we're all projecting at this point. Before I get into the draft, I'm going to talk about the wild day that was Thursday in the NFL world. So Thursday comes, it's draft day. Everyone's been waiting for so long, and people are excited. That NFL media is tweeting out, all their fans are, who are we going to get? And then we just get some crazy storylines just dumped on us right before the draft. And the first one being Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow is back in the NFL. I don't know who missed Tim Tebow in the NFL. I know I certainly didn't. But he's back in the NFL. And the Jacksonville Jaguars worked out the former NFL quarterback as a tight end a few weeks ago. Their general manager confirmed that on Friday, and this was just a shock. This was the first news dump I kind of saw of the day, and I thought this was definitely fake, but it wasn't. I thought Tim Tebow was still trying to play baseball, but that obviously didn't work with the Mets trying to work his way up the minor leagues. He never got pulled up. I always thought that was dumb. I just thought the Mets should have brought him up for at least one game just for the ticket sales. How exciting that would have been just to see. But Tim Tebow is trying to make a return to the NFL, and he's not a quarterback anymore. He is trying out as a tight end. So who knows how good he is at tight end? Who knows how long he's been training? But, I mean, he's trying to get a job with his old coach, Urban Meyer, a guy who won a national championship with him. And I think this is just a pretty crazy storyline to happen right on the day of the draft. I think this is a lot of just attention. I don't think anything will really come from it. I don't think he'll get a spot on the team, but I mean, who knows? Tim Tebow surprises everyone at all times, it seems like. People forget that he won a playoff game against the Steelers while really not being able to throw a football at all. It's pretty remarkable that he did that. He won a playoff game going 10 for 21 with 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. I remember the Demaryius Thomas play. I think everyone remembers that during the whole Tebow year. They went on to get killed by the Patriots in the next round, and then the Broncos ended up signing Peyton Manning the next year, so Tim Tebow's short-lived quarterback career in the NFL was done after that. He had a few other stints at some other places trying to get it back up, but he really just couldn't throw the football. So overall, I don't think Tim Tebow is going to play on an NFL team next season, but it's fun to kind of talk about it. It's fun. It's a fun storyline to look at just because you have the ties with Urban Meyer. You have people already saying, well, Trevor Lawrence is on the hot seat because the Jags drafted Trevor Lawrence and now they're going to bring in Tim Tebow and Tim Tebow's going to try to take his job. That's just not going to happen. And if he comes in as a tight end, who knows what he'll be able to do as a pass catcher. But Tim Tebow, back in the news cycle and back into your world, NFL fans. So get ready. But then the NFL news world was just not done. And some even more groundbreaking news came out, and it became official. It was reported by Adam Schefter that Aaron Rodgers is really fed up in Green Bay. So the news came out that Rodgers is completely disgruntled with the Packers. It's something that's been building up over the last 2-3 years now. Some news came out that the 49ers called the Packers and offered the 3rd overall pick and a bunch of more some starters and some more picks, first-round picks. The Packers obviously declined that, but that just started the whole news cycle of why is Aaron Rodgers on the trading block? Why are teams calling Green Bay to even trade him? He just won the MVP last year, but the Packers aren't budging, and it's really seems like this is different. So they declined the calls from the 49ers, but there have been some other teams rumored to be interested. Matt LaFleur said Sunday that he can't even fathom not having Rodgers. It's kind of similar to the Deshaun Watson situation where Rodgers is pretty fed up, but the difference is the team has been good. They've been in the NFC Championship game the last 2 years, and Aaron Rodgers just won an MVP award. So that just kind of puts in perspective how crazy this storyline is. To me, this is really a self-inflicted issue by the Packers. This all started when they drafted Jordan Love last year in the first round, already drafting his replacement. Rodgers started to kind of show signs of anger then. There were some talks of him being upset and wanting out last year. There were some talks right after the season ended of how he was just not sure where his future is. I just truly think he wants a change of scenery. But there's some crazy stats that Adam Schefter pointed out. So no quarterback has ever played 17 seasons with the Packers. The Packers have had great quarterbacks for the last 20, maybe 30 years. Definitely 20, 30 years. Get this, though. Bart Starr, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Packers, he played 16 seasons in Green Bay. Brett Favre, their next quarterback, he played 16 seasons in Green Bay. And then right after Brett Favre comes Aaron Rodgers, who just finished his 16th season with the Green Bay Packers in the NFL. So I'm not normally a stats guy. I kind of am, but it seems like Aaron Rodgers is due to leave Green Bay. And that's not just the Bears fan in me talking and saying I want Aaron Rodgers out of the division, because I definitely do. He's haunted me for the last 10 years as an NFL fan. But what do you even trade for Aaron Rodgers? That's where I start to get confused on how this will all work out, because you have a quarterback who is arguably the best passer of the football in the history of the sport. And what does it even start with? The 49ers tried to trade a Hall. That didn't work. I think the Broncos are involved. The Raiders are another prospect that he would like to go to. And I really want to see more teams get involved here, because it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of spots available right now. of teams that are really willing to give up their whole future, even though you're getting a league MVP in Aaron Rodgers. So overall, this is crazy to me. It would be the first time an MVP didn't return to his team the following season. And I just don't know. I think when you talk about trades for Aaron Rodgers, it has to start with 3-4 first-round picks and then 2 Pro Bowl, if not like all-pro caliber players. So that's just going to be a lot for any team. And I don't know how many teams have all that capital to give up. So if you were to ask me right now, do I think he leaves? I would say 60% chance he stays, 40% chance he leaves. I just don't. But it's close. It's obviously close, 60-40. But this just feels really different, and it feels like he really, really wants somewhere else to go. The Bears fan in me obviously wants him gone really bad. They just got Justin Fields, which I'll get to later. Would leave him leaving would just leave the NFC North completely wide open to any team. And it really comes down to if Aaron Rodgers is willing to be as stubborn as Deshaun Watson was with Houston and how he dealt with that situation, because Aaron Rodgers started to host Jeopardy. Could he go all in and just say, I don't want to play with you, Green Bay, I'll just host Jeopardy if you don't want to trade me? That would be pretty crazy. And the Packers organization is kind of just in this scramble recovery mode. They're kind of panicking. They don't know what to do. They don't want to trade him. I think they're just going to wait this out as long as possible, and we'll see how this kind of develops over the course of the year. But it was interesting when you had Brett Favre wanting to leave. There seemed to be some disdain from the fan base with Brett Favre, and they kind of wanted they were kind of at ends with him, and they wanted him gone. But right now, Packers fans seem to be really upset at the management of Green Bay and the general managers, the guys making the decisions, because they're obviously not showing that they want him enough. And I don't know why you would. He's 37 years old, just won MVP, and you just don't treat your franchise quarterback like this. You don't draft a backup quarterback and make the decisions you've made the last 2-3 years, and treat your quarterback like this, because he just won MVP. And it seems like they're trying to say we are really appreciative of what Aaron's been able to do, and we just want him. We want him in Green Bay next year, but it might be too late. So that's something to keep an eye on. I'll have more updates on that as that storyline progresses. But wow, what a story to drop right before, or a few hours before, the draft started in Cleveland. So now I'm going to get into the 2021 NFL draft. Boy, this was fun. It was one of the more highly anticipated drafts of my lifetime. Just me being so involved with the league and covering the league at length this offseason and looking at all these teams' needs. I think this was just the most intriguing draft for me. And we had a good idea of what the top of the draft was going to look like closer to the draft, the biggest being what the 49ers were going to do with the third pick. So let's get into each of these, because that was a very interesting development with San Francisco. So I'm going to get into that. Number 1, the Jacksonville Jaguars selected Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. He's going to start right away. He's QB1. It's really an exciting time to be a Jags fan, and I just can't think of anything negative to say about Trevor Lawrence, so I won't, and I'll just move on to the next pick, because we all knew that was going to happen. One thing I was a little upset about is how Jacksonville used all 10 minutes of their draft clock to pick Trevor Lawrence, when they've had almost a year now to lock that pick in. So that was kind of just a dumb draft thing for me that I thought was pretty ridiculous. Let's move on to pick number 2, because we kind of knew this where the Jets were going to go with this, and they went with Zach Wilson, the BYU quarterback. Another guy that's going to start right away. There's no veteran waiting for him on the team right now. I can't wait to see how this turns out. I feel like it's either going to be incredible or an absolute disaster. They've done a great job to put an offensive line and receivers around him, both in the draft and free agency. But it's going to be up to Zach Wilson and what he can do, because the level of competition was the biggest concern for him at BYU. You don't know if all those clean pockets and all that room to run around and make plays off balance are going to be there on the New York Jets, because the Jets just don't have a history of having quarterbacks, of giving quarterbacks the most ideal situations. I'll say that. So now we get to the third pick, and this was, if you asked me a week ago who this third pick was going to be, I said Mac Jones. I had Mac Jones in my latest mock draft, and I was dumb for that. It was all just smoke, and the morning I woke up from the draft, you started to see some buzz about this, and then I knew right away that they were going to go with Trey Lance, just because this always happens, and NFL media completely just made up a narrative around the 49ers wanting this Mac Jones, when the 49ers hadn't said anything. They hadn't said anything at all about who they were going to pick. They kept this under wraps, which I kind of like how they do a lot of teams do this in the NFL. They're really secretive, and they don't give hints to any of their picks leading up to the draft. So they go with Trey Lance, the North Dakota State quarterback. Like I said, it was all a giant smoke screen. I bit for the trap. A lot of people bit for the trap, but they were probably never considering Mac Jones when I really think about it. And I think they knew, just for the relationship with Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh, they knew who New York was going to pick with that second pick. So they pretty much had the first pick without Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, so they could just do whatever they wanted, but they did keep it under wraps. If I were to guess, Garoppolo starts week 1, and we'll see how Trey Lance develops over training camp, learning that complicated offense. But overall, he was being regarded as the smartest quarterback in this draft, and I think it's only a matter of time before Jimmy G gets replaced in San Francisco. So the 49ers, I thought they couldn't go wrong with whoever they were going to pick at this number 3 spot, and taking Trey Lance. He's got the athleticism that Kyle Shanahan wants in a quarterback. He's got the overall skill set and the big arm and just the overall potential that I think San Fran needs to push them over that hump and get them to win a Super Bowl, because we already know they have a Super Bowl roster and organization right now. So with the number 4 pick, Atlanta Falcons grabbed Kyle Pitts. This was a pretty chalk pick leading up to the draft. We knew, I think, where Atlanta was going to go with this. Just my favorite prospect in the draft. A lot of people kind of questioning why they're taking a tight end at 4. I see that just because if you're going to draft a tight end at the number 4 overall spot, and you're a team like the Falcons with just overall just a lot of needs throughout the roster, are you going to be targeting Kyle Pitts 15 times a game? Because that's really we're going to get that fourth overall pick worth out of him, I think. And to me, that would be a sound argument, but Kyle Pitts is just way more than a tight end when you really look at it. He's going to be one of the more unique weapons, I think, in the history of the NFL. Just how he's going to pretty much be a receiver. I think he will be lined up everywhere throughout the games, and just in terms of the threat he provides in the red zone, you got to get him a lot of targets. And I think Matt Ryan will really start to like Kyle Pitts and that huge catch radius that he has. Now, when you look at that receiving core with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and now Kyle Pitts, I think that's just one of the most lethal passing attacks in the NFL by far. It's just going to be up to Matt Ryan to kind of return to that former MVP self. So number 4, Atlanta grabs Kyle Pitts. At number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals took Jamar Chase, another sort of chalk pick. We knew where this was going to go, or where Cincinnati was going to go with this, kind of leading up, just because I think people understood the influence that Joe Burrow has on this team at this point, just being the franchise guy. And Joe Burrow probably told Cincinnati that he would really like to have Jamar Chase, his old teammate, one of the more talented receivers we've seen at college football in quite some time. And just the overall size, speed, athleticism. Time will tell if they needed to take Penei Sewell with this pick, the tackle out of Oregon, to protect Joe Burrow, because that's the most important thing. But, it immediately makes that wide receiver position for the Bengals one of the most feared in the league and one of the most youngest and most talented receiving groups in the league by far. So the Cincinnati Bengals took Jamar Chase. I like that pick when you really look at it. Number 6, might have come to a surprise for a few people, but the Dolphins grabbed a receiver, and it wasn't Devontae Smith, which I disagree with. I would have grabbed Devontae Smith with the Bengals pick if that's really what they wanted, but I completely understand the whole Jamar Chase potential and idea of Jamar Chase being a number 1 receiver in the NFL. Just more, I guess, off recency bias, I would like to have Devontae Smith because of what he was able to do last year. But the Dolphins grabbed Jalen Waddle, to his old teammate. I think Waddle is the closest thing to like a Tyreek Hill type threat in the draft, because if you just get the ball in his hands, there's big plays that will happen. I mean, when you look at when you watch highlights of Jalen Waddle, and he has some rare ability. Nick Saban has been talking about this lately, just kind of hyping his guys up for the draft, but he has the rare ability to kind of hit that second gear and turn upfield and just accelerate faster than most people in the league and most receivers other than guys like Tyreek Hill and those speedy threats like that. But overall, the Dolphins, you can't go wrong with Jalen Waddle. They already have those kind of big pass catchers. And now you have Will Fuller, you have Devontae Parker, and Jalen Waddle. That's another just lethal young receiving core that has so much speed. I mean, when you look at Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle, that's easily one of the fastest O-line or receiver groups in the NFL. So those are the top 6 picks in the draft. Those were pretty chalk. I was waiting for something kind of surprising to happen, a team to move up to take a quarterback. But overall, I can't complain with those top 6 picks because you can make an argument that they were the right move at the time for any of those teams. So before I get into the rest of the first round, I'm going to get into a quick commercial break. I wanted to thank you all for listening. Remember to download, subscribe on Apple Play, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, Google Play. And visit GSMCpodcast.com for all of the content Golden State Media Concepts has to offer. I'm Wyatt Krieger, your host. I will be right back for the rest of round 1 soon.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. I just got done wrapping up the top 6 picks in this year's 2021 NFL Draft. Just some overall reactions to these picks and what I thought when they went down. Let's get started. Let's get right into it with number 7. The Detroit Lions were on the clock. I thought they initially were going to trade out of this spot, but they ended up not doing it, and this ended up being the first hilarious moment of the draft so I'm happy they didn't trade out because they drafted Penei Sewell, the tackle out of Oregon. I really liked Rashawn Slater, but I guess the more and more you looked at it, Penei Sewell is just one of the better offensive line prospects in quite some time, probably since Quentin Nelson at the Colts, and we know how that's worked out for them in Indianapolis. That's like the last time I've heard an offensive lineman at least being spoke about so highly. And what was funny about this pick was just the Lions' new head coach Dan Campbell and their GM Brad Holmes were in their draft room And after they got Penei Sewell, they were just going absolutely nuts, jumping into each other's arms, high-fiving, screaming, fist bumps. They were so excited. And I guess it's understandable when you look at the prospect that is Penei Sewell and what Dan Campbell wants to do really in the trenches up front with his offensive and defensive lines at first. So they were obviously really excited. I heard after the draft, or after that pick was made, that one NFL coach said Penei Sewell is the closest thing to a surefire Hall of Famer in this draft by far. So really a great pick by Detroit, and the Lions have a lot of needs, but this is just one on a long list of needs for the Detroit Lions, who are probably going to have a rough season this year. So Lions grab Penei Sewell. Number 8, here's where things kind of start to get weird, because Carolina's on the clock, and I thought there was a chance they'd take a swing at quarterback. I know Sam Darnold, they just got Sam Darnold, but when you look at overall just his contract, how cheap it is, and then just overall the kind of flexibility of the quarterback situation, it's always smart to grab a quarterback, and especially when there were 2 really talented ones at this point in the draft available. So the Panthers did not get a quarterback. They got the first cornerback off the board in J.C. Horn, which is another surprise to me. The South Carolina corner, he probably has the highest potential of any corner in this draft. But again, talk about a guy who covered the best receivers in the SEC, always got the toughest matchup week in and week out, and just showed great overall coverage ability to play press, ability to cover guys like Kyle Pitts, bigger guys, and really I think Patrick Surtain is the safer pick here, but I can argue with Carolina going after the higher potential guy, and they need a lockdown corner. They had a franchise worst 7 interceptions last season, so corner was obviously a big need for them coming into this draft. I thought they were going to go quarterback, but they ended up getting J.C. Horn out of South Carolina. Can't complain with that pick. And then number 9, Broncos, another team that I thought could take a quarterback, and they didn't. They went corner as well. 2 corners back-to-back, 8-9. I don't think anyone was really expecting that at that spot, those 2 spots. I for sure wasn't, and I think the Cowboys got taken off by that. You'll see why in the next few picks, but the Broncos take Patrick Surtain. I would assume he was just their highest player on the board, on their draft board. He had their highest overall grade of any position, and you know how Vic Fangio likes to build his teams and how he wants to play football because he wants to have a lockdown corner, and that roster is looking better and better the more we look at it. If Teddy Bridgewater can be just slightly better than what Teddy Bridgewater normally is, that team can be dangerous this year. But like I said, as of now, they will go into this season with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. Who knows? They could take a big swing at Aaron Rodgers, and I think that would be cool just because Denver just gets good quarterbacks. They got Peyton Manning, and I wouldn't be surprised if they took a swing at Aaron Rodgers. Guys just want to play there. They have a great football culture, I think, overall in Denver. They have great fans, great stadium, great city, and they took Patrick Surtain, who I think is going to be a surefire all-pro player in the next 4 or 5 years. So the Broncos get their corner in Patrick Surtain. So on to pick number 10. Guess who was on the clock? The Dallas Cowboys. No, they were not. It was the first trade of the draft. So here's where me as a Bears fan got really, really excited and kind of nervous too, because we have the first trade of the draft at number 10. We got 2 cornerbacks back-to-back, and Mac Jones and Justin Fields are still on the board, 2 quarterbacks. I started to get nervous. There's a guy available, and Ryan Pace is now sitting at 20, which is a lot more reasonable than trading into the top 10. So now I'm just starting to think, what are the Bears doing? What kind of action is going on in their war room? But the Eagles trade up with the Cowboys. So the draft order at that point was Cowboys at 10, Giants at 11, and Eagles at 12. The Giants were definitely going to take Devontae Smith and the Eagles really wanted to get that position right. So they trade up with the Cowboys, kind of a little jab at the Giants, just kind of interdivision trading. I love that. And they take Devontae Smith with the 10th overall pick. I absolutely love that pick. One of my favorites in the first round. He should just not have come close to falling out of the top 10 in my opinion, but he got there at 10. And they really wanted him. They really wanted to get this receiver position right because it's just not pretty. Their history of drafting wide receivers is quite ugly, and I think it's a position that Howie Roseman really wanted to get right. So you look at some of their most recent draft picks. When you look at wide receivers, you've got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who was picked before DK Metcalf. Mac Hollins, Jalen Reagor was their first round pick last year before they picked Justin Jefferson, before the Vikings picked Justin Jefferson. So 2 big misses there alone. You've got guys like Jordan Matthews, Riley Cooper, Nelson Aguilar, all either gone out of the league or on different teams. Nelson Aguilar actually had a career resurgence in Las Vegas after he left Philadelphia, so that sucks too. But the Eagles needed to get this position right, and Devontae was my favorite receiver in the draft. So I loved this pick, and I think he's going to be great. And I think it was crucial to get Hurts a weapon this offseason because Devontae Smith has potential to be one of the best to ever do it. I honestly think that. I just think with his route running and his ability to be just a savvy wide receiver and get open, he has 100% the potential to be one of the best receivers in the league. So here is probably the biggest news of draft day, and I'm not saying this just because I am a Bears fan, but the Bears traded up to the number 11 spot. And wow, I was so excited. I was nervous. I was staring at the Giants logo at the bottom of the screen. I didn't think they were going to pick a quarterback, but knowing with the Vikings behind them and knowing the Patriots right behind the Vikings at 15, I just didn't know. I thought either of those teams could have easily taken a quarterback, and Ryan Pace did not want to take that risk. So he trades up with the New York Giants. They swapped picks in the first round and then traded a 2022 first rounder. So not the biggest haul, not a haul like they gave up for Mitch Trubisky, but it's still some draft capital, and there had to be some trust there from the higher-ups in the organization that gave Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy their blessing to take a quarterback, because I thought this was a possibility, and I kept going into the draft. I kept going, they can't just go into the season with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles. They can't. I've been saying that for weeks now, but the only thing kind of holding me back was whether the ownership was going to let them do that. So they did, and they gave him his blessing. I thought Ryan Pace played the board perfectly. The Bears had to get a spot before Minnesota and New England, like I said, and they have a franchise quarterback with extreme potential, I think, for the first time in the history. Obviously, you drafted Mitch Trubisky, and the overall feeling was, we don't know what's going to happen. This guy with a lot of upside and not much college starts is on our team. We don't know how good he really is going to be, but Justin Fields is just different. He's been the guy forever. He's been the guy in Georgia when he played football. He obviously left Georgia because Jake Fromm had made it to a national championship, and Kirby Smart was not going to budge and just loved Jake Fromm so much. So he had to move on, and there were some other reasons why he had to get out of Georgia, but overall, you're talking about a guy who's won 2 Big Ten Player of the Years awards at Ohio State. And this whole offseason, it's been, for pretty much the last 5-6 years, it's been Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. They were competing at Elite 11 together. They competed in high school together. They know they have a good friendship, and they've been the two best college football players in the league, in the nation, the last 2 years. So I am so excited about this pick. It obviously needs to play out. I think the biggest criticism of Fields and why he fell in the first place is just the throwing mechanics and the kind of ability to anticipate receivers getting open. But overall, just the poise he has, the 4.4 speed, his ability to make plays. He has a huge arm, and it's completely unlike any quarterback the Bears have ever had. Chicago just doesn't have any history of having black quarterbacks, and if that being said, athletic quarterbacks. And we have that now. And overall, I think it's just one of the most highly recruited prospects that's ever been in Chicago. And it seemed really similar to Deshaun Watson falling in his draft, in my eyes. That's the kind of vibe I got from it, just someone who's proven himself time in and time out in college football, and someone who felt probably more than he should have when you think about it. And I don't know who knows if Trey Lance and if Zach Wilson are that much better and have that much higher of a ceiling than Justin Fields, but Bears fans are just completely ecstatic with this move by Ryan Pace. Not to just completely get into the Bears here, but it was the biggest news story of the draft. So I want to talk about this at length. Because does Fields start right away? We had the first quarterback. Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson will start. Trey Lance most likely will not, just because of his overall need to get more snaps under him in his football career. The more I think about it, I think he starts, but I'm kind of confused because Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy obviously came out and said Andy Dalton's the starter. But that's true until it's not. And you know that you don't know how long that leash is. It's very vague, coaches and GM speak, when you hear coaches say that he's the starter. But I think if Justin Fields isn't showing that he's better than Andy Dalton right away, then there's probably going to be some issues with that pick, because you have to consider Nagy's history in Kansas City, letting Patrick Mahomes sit behind Alex Smith, and then kind of comparing that to this situation with Justin Fields and Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton is someone who was just signed to Chicago. Alex Smith was someone who I think the Chiefs owed a lot to, someone who had been there, won a lot of games, made it to the playoffs with them. And I think Patrick Mahomes, it was in his best interest to sit and learn. But I think just Justin Fields' floor right now is going to be really high. And I don't think it'll be long before you start to see him outshine Andy Dalton in training camp, because at the end of the day, like I said, if Justin Fields is not showing out and isn't looking better than Andy Dalton, then that's some issue. But I think the best case scenario for Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy is you start Dalton week 1, he starts to win some games, the offense is playing extremely well, they're able to run the football, and you have Fields sitting in the wings, and everyone knows we've got a guy, and everyone in the organization knows we've got a guy. So overall, I think the biggest thing with this trade up and pick is just the perception of Ryan Pace, because before this draft, it was fire Pace, fire Matt Nagy. We're going to go into the season with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles. This is going to be miserable. It's just going to be a boring, boring season. And this pick just kind of sends a whole jolt of excitement throughout all of the Bears fans. And I myself already ordered my jersey. And I just think it's quite a unique time to be a Chicago Bears fan, because the history of quarterbacks. Jay Cutler is probably the best quarterback we've ever had in the history of the franchise. And now Justin Fields has a chance to be the guy. And I love Justin Fields. I love this pick. This is my pick of the draft. It's unbiased, of course, but number 11, the Bears make that trade and they get their guy in Justin Fields. So this put the Cowboys next on the clock at 12 after trading back with the Eagles. I thought this was a solid trade back by Jerry Jones. The Cowboys grabbed Micah Parsons, the Penn State linebacker, another case of probably the best player on the board. The Cowboys were probably going to go cornerback at 10 and probably wouldn't have traded back if they didn't go 8 and 9. They probably weren't expecting that, but they got some capital back and got a really talented linebacker that was probably really high up on their board anyways. So the Cowboys getting Micah Parsons to pair with Jalen Smith. I also saw they're not picking up Leighton Vander Esch's fifth-year option after he had an abysmal season last year in Dallas. So overall, I think that was a great pick by Jerry Jones, and I think he's someone that's going to start right away and make big plays in Dallas. So the Cowboys get Micah Parsons with number 12. Number 13, the Chargers were on the clock, and this was a great pick again. Northwestern offensive tackle Rashawn Slater goes to the Chargers. One of my favorite picks in the first round, I will say. He was my favorite lineman in the draft leading up to it. Just the level of play and what he did to Chase Young 2 years ago, I think will always stick with me. And I just think this is the guy that's going to start for the next 10, 15 years in LA. And they're really starting to build a really talented roster with the Chargers, because I think you look at Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater, I think those guys will be true cornerstone pieces for that team for the next 5 to 10 years, and we're going to see them for a while. So the Chargers grabbing Northwestern offensive tackle Rashawn Slater at number 14. Or at 13, sorry. And then number 14, the Vikings trade back with the New York Jets. They take Elijah Vera Tucker, the interior offensive lineman out of USC. This was just mainly a position of need for them. They traded with the Vikings, who I bet they thought were going to take him. The best interior offensive lineman in the draft by far, and they really needed to protect Zach Wilson at all costs. So you got to create pockets for him to run around, and now you have two really strong foundational pieces of that offensive line in Mekhi Becton, their pick last year, and now Elijah Vera Tucker. So hopefully Zach Wilson will have some time to throw the ball and do what he can do in New York this season. So number 15, this was another huge pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. The New England Patriots were on the board, and Bill Belichick did something that he has never done in the history of his time as New England's head coach. He drafted a quarterback, and he drafted Mac Jones, who fell all the way to New England. After everyone predicted Mac Jones to the 49ers, all that smoke, he goes all the way to 15 to New England. Like I said, there's guys always fall, and Fields fell and Mac Jones fell out of the top 10. So I think New England was very fortunate. Who knows who they had higher on their draft board, whether it was Fields or Mac Jones. But this just worries me because I saw this with Mitch Trubisky getting drafted and then Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson getting drafted right after. Because now that Mac Jones is on the Patriots, and if he turns into the next Tom Brady, the Bears, that'll just be miserable. I'll be miserable. If he turns into the next Tom Brady and then Justin Fields ends up not panning out, that will just be just horrible. I think it'll be devastating for Bears fans. But overall, Mac Jones to New England is one of the best fits, I think, in the draft. He is another guy that I don't think will start right away. If I were to have my money on it, I don't think he would start this season, and it's really up to Cam, because if Cam really starts to play bad like he did at some points last year, and instead of playing like he did at the beginning of last year, then they might be calling for Mac Jones time in New England. And so right now I think it's Cam's job to lose, just also with how complex that offense is, and Cam having a second year of experience while Mac Jones is just starting to kind of learn the playbook. I think that is going to be huge, just that time to really understand that New England offense. But overall, Jones does all the things that they want out of the quarterback. He gets the ball out quick. He's accurate. He does what Bill needs him to do. And overall, this was an excellent pick for New England, because you have a chance to get someone for the future. You spent a lot on your defense and offensive weapons in free agency on guys that are pretty much already proven. So why not take a stab at quarterback with this number 15 pick? Because he fell to you. And whether that's where he should have gone or not, or whether that's an over pick, I think 15 is right around the range that Mac Jones belonged to go in this draft, just based off what he did last year. Another note, Ernie Adams. This was Ernie Adams' final draft. And if you don't know who Ernie Adams is, I think he's my favorite person in the Patriots organization, just because he's a guy who has one of those weird titles. He's like a quality control supervisor, assistant personnel coordinator, something like that, where his job is kind of undefined, but he's just Bill Belichick's right-hand man. And I'll never forget watching a Patriots game probably 4 or 5 years ago, and Brady was going over to the phone to go talk to someone in the booth, and there was like a red phone on the sideline that just had a piece of tape over it, and it just said Ernie. And I was like, what is that? Who is Ernie? Like, who could that be? And just learning more about Ernie as the years have gone on, and knowing how much of just like a football genius he is, I just wanted to give him a shout out because this is his final draft. He's done after this season. And if Ernie Adams likes this pick, then it's probably going to be a good one because that guy knows more about football than anyone. And just have to shout out the legend Ernie Adams real quick. So New England took Mac Jones at 15. The Cardinals had a really good pick, I think, at number 16. They took Zaven Collins, freak athlete, just an awesome draft moment. He was breaking down into tears, showed so much emotion. That's like another just great part of the draft is just having the overall life-changing experience, getting to watch this life-changing experiences over and over again, and watching guys' dreams, lifelong dreams, finally come true. I think that's just the coolest thing overall about the draft. And Zaven Collins, the linebacker out of Tulsa, I think this was a great pick for Arizona. He's a freak athlete. The Cardinals needed defense more than anything, I think. And you're kind of pairing him with the old Clemson linebacker Isaiah Simmons, who was a freak athlete last year but didn't overall produce where the Cardinals needed him to. Collins does a great job of just reading the quarterback and making plays all over the field. So I think this is the type of guy the Cardinals need to have in Arizona. Just someone who can make plays, fly around, and be a captain of that defense. So Zaven Collins to Arizona. That is pick number 16 in the 2021 NFL Draft. Before I get to the rest of the first round, I'm going to get into a quick commercial break. You are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. Again, I am your host, Wyatt Krieger. Be sure to download, subscribe, leave a review, comment, visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at gsmc_football. I'll be right back after this short word from our sponsors.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast 2021 NFL Draft Edition. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at WKrueger3, WKRUEGER3, and you can follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. That's also on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. Visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com, and be sure to download, subscribe, leave a review on any of our podcasts. I am going over the first round of the NFL draft, and I will shortly be going over the second round as well. But we are leading off with pick number 17 in the first round that belonged to the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders went ahead And this was a head scratcher. This was one of my first. I couldn't really see where they were going here. They selected Alex Leatherwood, the Alabama offensive tackle. It really seemed like a reach. And when you listen to the broadcast, a lot of the announcers or the analysts were criticizing this pick, just saying they could have gotten him way later in the draft. If that's who they wanted, they could have traded back. I kind of agree with the notion that John Gruden just really liked his name, Alex Leatherwood, and thought that was a great football name. But you can't argue with the position selection, I don't think, because of how much offensive linemen the Raiders lost last year, and then how important it is to protect Derek Carr. So the Raiders getting Alex Leatherwood at 17, and then that brought up the Miami Dolphins with another pick to number 18. They grabbed the best pass rusher in the draft, arguably, in Jalen Phillips, who fell all the way to 18. They really just had to kind of fill out their roster. It was their second pick of the first round. Phillips has a lot of raw potential, but we'll see if he can make plays in Miami for a defense that was young but pretty talented last year and made a lot of big plays in both the special teams and defensive side of the ball. They made big plays throughout the year that led to them winning a lot of games despite the poor quarterback play. So number 18, the Dolphins grab Jalen Phillips. Number 19, some people were surprised by this as well, but the Washington football team grabs Jamin Davis, inside linebacker out of Kentucky. Not that this really changes anything, but the Washington football team still has the best front seven in the NFL, and I think Jamin Davis is a lethal prospect for Ron Rivera to work with, just because he's a freak athlete. He has 4.37 speed. That's like a wide receiver, that's wide receiver speed, and he's absolutely shredded. There were a lot of pictures. He's just absolutely built, and I think he's going to be a guy that flies sideline to sideline for Ron Rivera, and that was definitely a position of need because they do need a cornerback, and they had some needs on the offensive line, but overall, I think the defense is going to be scary no matter who is that quarterback, because a lot of people wanted them to take quarterback at 19, but after kind of letting the draft play out and seeing both the Patriots select Mac Jones and then the Bears selecting Justin Fields at 11, I think they were just trying to get the best player available on their board, and Jamin Davis, can't argue with that because he has a lot of really great potential at the linebacker position, and that was what they needed. So at number 20, the Giants had one of the better picks in the first round with taking Kadarius Toney, the Florida wide receiver. I probably would have gone with Rashad Bateman here, but Kadarius Toney kind of probably fits more of that need because you have Kenny Golladay, who's the bigger body, contested catches, while Kadarius Toney offers that really quick speed, can play in the slot, and will get a lot of separation. So I think they played the draft well, and the talk going in was always how Dave Gettleman, the Giants GM, never trades back. He always is trading up in the draft, giving up capital, and he finally traded back. So that was another big storyline after this draft. Toney is really fast. He gets separation. He runs some pretty remarkable routes when you watch his film. And looking at the Giants receiving core, you got Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, who's a proven number 2, number 3 wide receiver, and now Kadarius Toney. And then you look at Evan Ingram, who needs to emerge more from the tight end position. It's all up to Danny Jones. And we talked about this offseason. It's all going to be up to Danny Jones. I don't think he is that guy, but I don't know. There's a lot of talent in New York right now on that offensive side of the ball. And you get Saquon back. If that offensive line can play slightly above average, then you're looking at a pretty lethal offense here to team with a defense that started to emerge last season. So, number 20, the Giants get Kadarius Toney. At 21, the Colts grab Kwity Paye. I thought he was going to go a little higher. There was a lot of buzz around him on draft day on Thursday. This is a great value pick here. A lot of Colts needed an offensive tackle, but I think they grabbed the best position or best player available on their board. He is an elite pass rushing prospect. I liked him a little more as a prospect than Jalen Phillips, but you can't argue with the overall production just because Kwity Paye doesn't have the stats to really prove it, with not playing that much last season because of COVID. And he's a really explosive player. He's strong enough to get into the backfield, and the Colts front seven is also going to be really, really lethal next year if Kwity Paye can emerge for them. At 22, the Titans grabbed Caleb Farley, the Virginia Tech cornerback, a guy with a lot of potential, a guy who runs blazing 40-yard dashes, has shown all sorts of athleticism, and he's a top 10 talent. I truly believe that, and he really only has 1.5 to 2 full seasons of playing corner in his whole football career. So I just think there's so much room for him to grow. I know the injury concerns are there. There were some COVID concerns on draft day. He had tested positive, then tested negative, and then tested positive again. So that was just kind of like a little storyline leading up to the draft. But I would not be surprised if he ends up being the best corner in the draft, just because there's so much raw talent, so much potential, and the speed, the size, and athleticism is all there from the Virginia Tech corner. And he's young. He's football young at that position, so he still has a lot of room to go. I think his best football is still ahead of him. Number 23, the Vikings, after trading back with the Jets, they grabbed an offensive tackle. This is who I had them getting a little earlier in the draft with some of my mock drafts, but they got Christian Darrisaw. I thought it was a great pick. Back-to-back Virginia Tech Hokies, which was huge for me as just a fan of the draft, watching my current college, university, have 2 players drafted. That was awesome. And who knows, maybe the Vikings take a shot at Fields if he was still available, but Darrisaw is a guy who's extremely intelligent, massive frame, and will be a starter right away, I think. And that's the Vikings need, more than anything else, they need to be solid with their offensive front seven and their defensive front seven. And they addressed that right away with this pick in Christian Darrisaw, and they got some draft capital with it by trading back. So Christian Darrisaw, the tackle from Virginia Tech to Minnesota. At 24, I think a lot of people had this penciled in their mock drafts, but the Pittsburgh Steelers selected Najee Harris, the Alabama running back. I wouldn't really take a running back in the first round, but Najee is the only one in this draft that can be, I think, a difference maker. If you're going to take one, it'd be him. And although I kind of try to stick to the principle that you shouldn't take running backs in the first round, but it all depends on what your team needs, what kind of style of football you're going to run, and then also the prospect. And the Steelers still need some help at offensive line, and the running game was just not there last year. And who knows if that was all James Conner's fault, but I think Najee Harris will be able to make up for a lot of the inadequacies in James Conner's game. And that way we'll kind of see what the Steelers' issues really were last year and how much really just that having a running game impacts Ben Roethlisberger's play, because I think it's huge if they're able to get first downs. They're able to get into 2nd and 4s, 3rd and 5s, short yardage situations, so Big Ben can kind of pick apart defenses that way. But I can't argue with it. Najee Harris is a freak athlete, put up incredible numbers at Alabama, and is going to be, I think he's going to be a great player for Pittsburgh. So we had 2 running backs go back-to-back. First, it was Najee Harris to the Steelers, and now number 25, the Jaguars were on the clock, and they got Travis Etienne. I thought this was a little bit of an overdraft for Jacksonville. But again, it's kind of similar to that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. They're trying to kind of team up old college teammates and put familiar faces around them, make them as comfortable as possible. And I can't argue with that overall mindset, even though it's probably smarter to not draft that way. It's probably smarter to pick the best players available. And I don't know if Travis Etienne was the second best running back. I don't know if he's worthy of a first round pick, just with all the needs that the Jacksonville has on their team. But again, you have that chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. I think that was definitely persuaded just by the overall presence of Trevor Lawrence on the team. They have a good running back in James Robinson, but I get the overall potential, I guess, of Travis Etienne just because of he played in big games. He's a really elusive runner. A lot of comparisons the last few years have been to Alvin Kamara, even though I don't think he's anywhere near as fast as Alvin Kamara, but he's a little bit bigger, and he is elusive. He knows he's really good at finding holes in the defense and kind of just reading defenders and where they're going when they're trying to tackle him and bouncing off defenders. And also he's good in the pass game. So just having that safety blanket for Trevor Lawrence on third downs. Maybe they'll line him up outside a little bit, but time will tell. I still think the chemistry is valuable, but I don't know if you should draft like that. So now we're on to pick number 26. The Browns grabbed Greg Newsome, one of my favorite picks in the draft. He's going to start right away. Opposite side, Denzel Ward. I think this Browns defense is just going to be scary at all levels. And you take a look at their second round pick they made this year. I think I'll get to that in a second. But just what a draft for Cleveland. I'm really excited for what they were able to do this draft. And I think they're going to be early. It's them and the Bills in the AFC to challenge Kansas City for the AFC title. I honestly think that. But overall, Newsome, he's a physical corner, can do all the things the Browns need, and he's really intelligent. And coming from Northwestern, coming from a really good defense last year, teams were scared to throw at him, and he has all the abilities you need in a corner right now, playing press, playing man, playing zone, and he's a willing tackler too. So Greg Newsome, I loved this pick by Cleveland. 2 back-to-back AFC North picks and 2 back-to-back AFC North picks that I loved as the pick number 27 came around. The Baltimore Ravens, they grabbed Rashad Bateman, the Minnesota wide receiver. I loved this pick. This is one of my favorites in the draft just because of overall fit and needs. Rashad Bateman's one of the few bigger receivers in this draft, along with Terrace Marshall, who was a 3rd or 4th round pick, maybe 5th round pick. And Rashad Bateman was just a stud. He's 6 foot 190. Lamar needed a big weapon, but he can also get open. He's an elite route runner. A lot of Keenan Allen route running comparisons, and he makes contested catches. I like him more than Kadarius Toney from Florida. But overall, just this fit here and needing to get Lamar weapons, I think is huge. I can't wait to see him and Lamar team up and kind of build their chemistry together because the Ravens needed a complement for Marquise Brown. You can't have Marquise Brown, the speedy slot receiver, be your number one guy. And you needed to have a true number one. And who knows if Rashad Bateman can become that. Who knows who else they'll target this offseason, if they will even target anyone else. But I can't argue with this pick. I really like this pick in Baltimore getting Rashad Bateman. Pick number 28. We're going to get into the final 4 picks of this first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. The Saints grabbed Peyton Turner from Houston. Turner has the active hands, the outstanding length, and the overall just kind of bend you need when you're talking about edge rushers. And he's a massive human because he's got crazy size at 6'6", 270 pounds. He has some skills to rush on the inside and also on the outside, so there's just that overall versatility there I think probably attracted Sean Payton and company. But he really has the size and strength to set the edge in the run and then also just rush and get after the quarterback. Seems like just another smart Saints draft pick. Here's a crazy stat that I learned this week. The Saints have not drafted a quarterback in the first 2 rounds in 50 years. I think the second most was Seattle, and it was 20-something years. But 50 years the Saints have gone without drafting a quarterback in the first or second round. So that's pretty crazy. They didn't do that this year, so they didn't break the trend. And I can see Peyton Turner from Houston making an impact right away. Number 29, the Packers were on the clock, and they picked an offensive player. No, they didn't. They refused to. They refused to draft offense. They refused to get weapons for Aaron Rodgers in the first round. And they took Eric Stokes, the Georgia cornerback. Great size and length. 4 interceptions last year. He pairs really well with Jair Alexander, who had a breakout season in Green Bay. But overall, I think this could have been a little bit of a reach. But the Packers go defense again, refuse to add more weapons for Aaron Rodgers, and I wonder if this pick made Aaron Rodgers a little more angry with the organization and just with Green Bay in general. Number 30 overall pick, the Buffalo Bills were on the clock, and they got, I think, who was the consensus next best pass rusher available in Greg Rousseau, the Miami edge rusher. Solid pick for Buffalo. He had the Bills had a lot of trouble rushing the passer last season, so kind of fills an immediate need. And the Bills are trying to build a ferocious defensive front because that's what you need to do when you want to compete with the Patrick Mahomes of the world. You need to get after him and you need to rush the passer. So 31, the Ravens were on the clock again. I remember they traded Orlando Brown, or the Chiefs. The Ravens traded Orlando Brown to the Chiefs, offensive tackle, for this 31st overall pick. And the Ravens selected Odafe Owe, the Penn State edge rusher. This guy is the definition of a boom or bust pick. Projects to have the highest upside of any other edge rusher in this draft class. He's 6'5", 260, really strong for his size, and he's going to be productive on that defense. When you talk about freak athletes and what he can possibly do, just going to a Ravens defensive culture that I think is taught both pass rushers and just all positions really well. They've developed positions really well, and I don't think this will be any different. They probably had their eye on this guy later or in the late first round, and that's why they made that trade to get the 31st overall pick. 0 sacks last season. It's a pretty crazy stat, but it was a weird year last year, and a lot of quarterback hits. He still put pressure on the quarterback, and I think the overall potential here is intriguing. At number 32, the Buccaneers are taking, or took, they went defense. They went Joe Tryon, the Washington inside linebacker. This guy's going to sit under the wings of the likes of Levante David and Shaq Barrett for the next few years until Levante David's NFL career is over. But Joe Tryon, the Washington inside linebacker, he's got a lot of speed, a lot of burst, and he can really get off the line. Just to kind of recap the first round, I thought the Bears, the Eagles, the Chargers, and the Ravens had some of the best value picks overall from where they picked. I thought the Titans getting Caleb Farley was huge. I thought just for that defense, they really needed to bring in a young corner with a lot of potential to develop. How about this stat? Nick Saban had 6 first-round picks in this year's draft, 10 total picks in this year's draft, which is just absurd when you consider 10 picks. That's what most colleges get in 20 years, and he had 10 picks in this draft, and then 6 in the first round. Just shows how crazy that 2017 Alabama recruiting class was and is. They now, out of that single recruiting class, Nick Saban, when he recruited the 2017 Alabama recruiting class, there have now been 8 first-round picks from that class. You have Tua, Jedrick Willis, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, all last year. And then now this year you have Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Alex Leatherwood, and Najee Harris. So just looking at 2017, Nick Saban must have just been on an absolute recruiting heater. And I think just overall, that's just a crazy stat. 8 first-round picks in one recruiting class. Just that is so much talent and so much development and so much just so many excellent football players in one class. So that was one of the biggest stats or most impressive stats that I saw after the draft, after the first round ended. The Packers. Here are their first round picks by position since 2012. This will make Packers fans and Aaron Rodgers probably upset. They have picked since 2012 defensive end, defensive back, safety, defensive tackle, cornerback, linebacker, backup quarterback Jordan Love to replace Aaron Rodgers, and then cornerback again. Like, do they really want Aaron Rodgers to leave? I just don't know. I just don't know at this point. still was an exciting first round, and I think just a lot of teams got a lot of game-changing players. I think Jamin Davis for Washington is a great fit. Peyton Turner, Mac Jones, and Zaven Collins. Some of just my favorite kind of potential picks in the draft, but obviously I think the Bears stole the show with getting Justin Fields. I thought the Eagles had one of the better picks in getting Devontae Smith, and then the Chargers adding Rashawn Slater was another great pick. So before I get to the second round really quick, I've got another commercial break. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. You're listening to the GSMC Football Podcast presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. As always, follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. Visit our website at gsmcpodcast.com, and I will be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. We are here for my final segment of today's episode. I'm going to get into the second round of the NFL Draft. A lot of good players were still on the board after day one, and a lot of teams really kind of solidified their drafts with these picks. Once again, you are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. As always, follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. Download, subscribe, leave a review. We really appreciate all of the feedback that we can get. Let's get into it because there were some good players left on the board after round one, and I'm going to quickly go over the 32 picks in the second round, what players fell to where they probably shouldn't have, or what players fell to where a lot of people didn't think they were going to. And I'm going to start it with pick number 33 because the Jags were on the clock to start the second round. And the Jags picked a corner. They picked the second Georgia corner off the board in Tyson Campbell. He's 6'1", 193, can kind of stay with bigger receivers, isn't as physical of a corner as some may like, but the Jags took a corner last year with the 9th pick in C.J. Henderson. So I think that more than anything, them picking a corner with the 33rd overall pick says a lot about where they're at with C.J. Henderson. I don't think they really trust, or maybe they wanted to kind of light a fire under him. They might not trust where he's at right now after last year, but overall, getting another corner in there, adding some depth at that position, I think is important for Jacksonville. And yeah, so they get Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. Can't go wrong with Georgia guys. They've been proven to be solid NFL players the last few years, and they've really started to fly off the board in the first and second round. So the Jags get Tyson Campbell. At 34, the Jets got Elijah Moore. Definitely the best receiver available in this draft, I think. They continue to add weapons for Wilson, and now their wide receiving core is starting to look pretty formidable. When you look at Corey Davis, you look at now they add Elijah Moore, and when you look at Elijah Moore, he's another Ole Miss wide receiver. That recent history there, receivers coming out of Ole Miss, guys that have fallen later in the draft. A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf are two perfect examples. Both of them fell. Maybe it's an issue of coaching at Ole Miss. Maybe it's an issue of what their offensive coordinators and receiving coaches are letting them do overall. But Elijah Moore, I think, is a guy that can be a star, and adding him to the Jets, I think, is huge. Number 35, the Broncos traded up 5 spots to number 35, and they grabbed Javonte Williams, the North Carolina running back. He's 5'10", 212 pounds, so he's got that short, kind of compact stature. And overall, I guess the Broncos were really high on this guy. I had him higher than ETA, and I really liked this running back, but they have Melvin Gordon right now. They're likely going to get rid of Phillip Lindsay, but they clearly wanted him. They moved up 5 spots, and I think it's still a great running back that adds a lot of value to that room. And running back is a position that it has a lot of fluidity, I guess. And overall, you can get guys in the late first, late second, third rounds that have proven to be formidable players. So I like this pick overall from the Broncos. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay moving forward, but he's another big playmaker for that team. At number 36, the first safety off the board went to the Miami Dolphins. They acquired this pick from Houston in the Laramie Tunsil trade, and they got Javon Holland, the Oregon safety, one of the few highly touted safety prospects in this draft. It wasn't a deep safety draft overall, but they were able to add Javon Holland. Solid pick. The Dolphins are really adding talent at all different facets of their team. They're building up an offensive line. They're adding receivers. They're adding guys in the back end of the defense. So Holland's a guy that can play in the slot, has great instincts, and is also can contribute on special teams as a punt returner. The Eagles, they picked at 37, and they grabbed Landon Dickerson, the Alabama center. Another best available on the board type pick. You can't go wrong with Alabama offensive linemen. The Eagles have a lot of turnover on their offensive line that won them that Super Bowl, so I think it's big for Miles Sanders in that running game and Jalen Hurts to have some protection up front, because Jalen Hurts was running for his life, and so was Carson Wentz for most of last year. At 38, the Patriots traded up with the Bengals, and this was another great move by Bill Belichick. They grabbed Christian Barmore, the Alabama defensive tackle. Like I said, another great pick. Barmore was a first-round talent through and through. I saw him in the first round in a lot of mock drafts before the draft. He's a guy that can probably start right away. He eats up space on the D-line, and the Patriots added a lot to the defensive tackle position this offseason because they really didn't like where they were at as far as the run game goes and overall just getting pressure on the quarterback up front. They added Devon Godchow. That was a big money signing, and then they also added Henry Anderson. So Barmore getting into that defense, getting into that system, I think is going to be a great fit for New England. At 39, Ryan Pace for the Chicago Bears made another trade up. He loves trading up in the draft more than anyone. And he traded up with Carolina to take the offensive tackle of the future for Chicago in Tevin Jenkins. I really loved this pick, not just because I'm a Bears fan, just because of the overall value of where you're getting him at 39. I think it's definitely worth it in terms of trading up. And they've sacrificed their third and fourth and I think fifth round picks to make this play or make this move, but Jenkins is worth it. He's going to be a stud. I really think he's going to play in the NFL for quite some time. There's 2 veteran tackles right now in Chicago, and I think they've said that he's gonna compete with them right away with both left and right tackle positions. He's a guy that finishes, it blocks, is great in the run game, is great in pass protection, and it really has that nasty side to him that you need in offensive lineman. I really thought he was better than Alex Leatherwood too, who the Raiders drafted in the first round. So just to kind of show you that overall value that they're getting. At 40, the Falcons traded back with Denver and got Richie Grant, the UCF safety. They need more secondary help. They were abysmal in that department last year, and overall, Grant has great football instincts. Doesn't really blow anyone away with the size and athleticism, but he made plays at UCF, that's what you can say, and he had 10 interceptions in his career, so the Falcons need more of that on the defensive side of the ball. At 41, the Lions grabbed Washington defensive tackle Leve Owunzurike. Another guy I saw in a lot of first rounds during mock draft season, and he finished his college career with only 7 sacks, but he's one of those guys that's on tape is always disrupting plays. You kind of see his impact on the field. And the Lions, they really wanted to get 2 big guys up front with these first 2 picks, and they did exactly that with their offensive tackle position in Penei Sewell and then defensive tackle Levi Owunzurike. So this is where I saw the Lions building those fronts for Dan Campbell because, like I said before, they have a lot of holes on that team. At 42, the Miami Dolphins had yet another pick. That was their 4th of the draft at that point so far. They grabbed Notre Dame offensive tackle Liam Eichenberg. I had him as my best player available on the board at this point. I'm pretty sure it's pretty crazy to think just how much talent this Dolphins wide receiver they can have because of how much draft picks they've acquired over the last few years. And they've made the right moves. I don't think it's crazy to say in 3 to 4 seasons, will this be the most talented roster in the NFL, most talented and full of youth, just because of how many shots they've had to pick guys in these early rounds. So just so many draft picks, so much young talent at so many different positions with a great young coaching staff. I love this pick for Miami. At 43, we had another trade up. The Raiders traded up with San Francisco. They grabbed Trevon Moehrig to pair with Jonathan Abram at safety. Trevon Moehrig was the TCU safety, another one of those guys on the short list of highly touted safeties in this draft. Abram was a pick that was made as part of the Khalil Mack trade, so it kind of made me want to ponder who won that trade, because Jonathan Abram, he's been good, but he's been injury prone so far. They also drafted Josh Jacobs, their stud running back, with those picks for the Khalil Mack trade. So I don't know if you really want to nitpick. I think you can kind of say that they didn't win that trade just because of the Bears have made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years, in large part due to Khalil Mack, while the Raiders have not. And you could argue which team is better and which team has been better the last 3 seasons, just because the Raiders are in such a tough division with Patrick Mahomes. But overall, they got to Trevon Moehrig. I think this is a good pick, but it raises some questions about Abram. But who knows? Maybe they can have a really bright young safety core in Las Vegas. At 44, the Cowboys finally get their cornerback that they really needed this draft. They got Kelvin Joseph from Kentucky. I thought this was a great pick. He's got some excellent speed, can cover the slot and different outside position schemes. The Cowboys need him to contribute right away, or they need Trevon Diggs to take a big step for that secondary to improve, because if not, you've got some lethal receiving cores now in the NFC East. When look at the Giants, you've got the Washington football team, who added De'Ami Brown, which I'll get to later, along with Terry McLaurin. And then you've got the Eagles, who just added Devontae Smith. So who knows? The Cowboys are going to need to be strong in the secondary the next year. So who knows if Kelvin Joseph can be that guy, that lockdown corner that Dallas has needed for a while. At number 45, the Jaguars get Walker Little, the Stanford offensive tackle. Needed some more protection for Trevor. Probably will be a guy that develops over the next few years. Could start inside at guard, but he's a massive human. He's 6'7", 315. You got to coach him up, and we'll see how he develops with Trevor Lawrence. At 46, the Bengals get Jackson Carman, the Clemson offensive tackle. So a lot of offensive tackles coming off the board at this point. You can't go wrong with just the school and the pedigree of Clemson and the experience that this guy's had playing in big games. But overall, he's going to be a guy that immediately competes probably for a guard spot at first and then gets moved out to tackle as he develops in the NFL. At 47, the Chargers grab Asante Samuel Jr. I thought this was a great pick for LA. They are really building a great team. The Chargers are. He's a little smaller at 5'10", 180, but has the history with his dad, who was a 4-time Pro Bowler in the NFL. And he's really just, you can tell he's learned a lot from his dad, because he's sound in his technique, and he's a really kind of corner that works on based off instincts, and he pays attention to detail. So I think this is a guy that's going to be able to learn in the pros really quick and develop fastly for LA, because they need some help in the secondary as well. At 48, the 49ers grabbed some future Trey Lance protection in Aaron Banks, the guard out of Notre Dame. The Notre Dame offensive linemen have been a safe bet in recent years, I will say. You could see him start right away for San Francisco, as that line really just wasn't as dominant as it was the year before when they went to the Super Bowl. At 49, I have another fantastic pick, I think, from Arizona. They got Rondale Moore, the Purdue wide receiver. I think this guy could have gone early second, late first, and I wouldn't have been shocked just because of how fast he is. I think he's the fastest player in the draft, along with Waddle. Just great value pick. One of my favorite players that I've watched out of all of these prospects in this draft. And just when the ball is in his hands, overall, big things are happening. Although he is 5'7", 181, I think he has the strength and the overall speed, and I think he will take that Christian Kirk spot from him right away as just a true playmaker, because Christian Kirk came on strong at the beginning of last year, but then kind of fell off, and the consistency just wasn't there. At 50, the Giants grab Azeez Ojulari. He was ESPN's second-ranked outside linebacker. Has a lot of really good bend and body control when you talk about rushing the passer, but he's got that burst off the line. Is somewhat of a polished pass rusher, but overall the athleticism and overall projectability isn't necessarily there. Hopefully, New York's new coach, Joe Judge, can coach him up and make that defensive front really just lethal in New York. At 51, the Washington football team grabbed their offensive tackle in Samuel Cosmi. I think it fits what they want to do in terms of just running the ball, another position of need for them, although I do think they need a corner really badly. He's an all Big 12 performer in 2020, and you can't go wrong with that pick. At 52, probably my favorite pick of the entire second round, the Browns grabbed Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 20th pick of the second round. He was a first rounder through and through. I'm not sure why he fell so much. And you saw guys like Jamin Davis and Zaven Collins go before him. But I think he's going to be right up there when you're looking at this linebacker class. And he doesn't have necessarily the freakish athleticism, but he does everything well. And I think that's really important. And having this guy on the Browns, just adding to that front, I think is going to be scary. He's 6'2", 221, can rush the QB from the inside linebacker spot. And I just think that Browns defense is going to be incredible. So, at 53, Dylan Radunz, the offensive tackle out of North Dakota State, goes to the Titans. He's got pretty average length at the position, but he's got some athleticism. He can move a bit. The Titans are pretty thin at offensive tackle, and I think the biggest criticism of Radunz is he just needs to get stronger. And I think if he does, he can be a perennial starter in the NFL. At 54, the Colts selected Dayo Odeyingbo, a 6'5", 285 Vanderbilt defensive end. So Colts going defense again. A lot of people thought they had needed a tackle, but they went defense with their first two picks. At 55, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected Pat Freiermuth, the Penn State tight end. Some shades of Heath Miller, not really a freakishly athletic tight end, but he's going to do all the little things in the red zone. He's got great hands. People are calling him Baby Gronk already, which is just, that never works out for teams who try to label their tight ends as Gronk. But Pat Freiermuth, I think he's going to be a solid player for Pittsburgh. Seattle had their first pick at number 56 overall, and they got Dwayne Eskridge, Central Michigan wide receiver. I thought this was probably a little bit of a reach depending on who was on the board, but he's dangerous. He's dangerous in the slot. He's dangerous as a returner, and the Seattle needed a third kind of slot wide receiver, so this kind of fits that mold. I was pretty surprised Seattle didn't go with this pick because the Rams grabbed him right after at 57 in Tutu Atwell. A lot of people criticize his size. He's only 5'9", 155, but he's got lightning quick feet, explosive speed, and I think Sean McVay will be able to do a lot with him. The Chiefs had their first pick of the draft at number 58 overall in the 2021 NFL Draft. They grabbed Nick Bolton, the Missouri inside linebacker, a guy who's going to bring a lot of effort and athleticism. They lost Damian Wilson last year, one of their top inside linebackers, so that kind of fills a need or a hole in that defense right away. At 59, I thought this was a great pick by Carolina. They grabbed Terrace Marshall, the LSU wide receiver. The Panthers, they got another weapon for Darnold. to add to that receiving core, someone who's played on teams just loaded with talent and loaded with receiver talent, to be specific, on LSU. And he's one of the few bigger wide receivers in this draft, so I can't complain about this pick for Carolina. I actually think it's a good fit. The Saints at pick number 60 grabbed inside linebacker Pete Werner from Ohio State. Not too many Ohio State players coming off the board in the first 2 rounds, but Werner is another great player for them. Doesn't have the freakish athleticism, but is instinctive, and he tackles really well, is great in zone coverage, and can read the quarterback's eyes at a high level. The Bills at 61 added Carlos Basham Jr. I thought this was another good pick with the 61st overall pick. Basham was projected as an earlier second rounder, I think, but again, he fell to the late rounds or later picks in the second. He has great size, great speed, and the Bills are really just trying to kind of do what the Bucs recipe was to beat the Chiefs last year and bolster that defensive front and get pressure on the quarterback, because that's just the next step that this team needs to take to get to the Super Bowl. Now the Packers added a center with the 62nd pick. They finally go offense. Josh Myers from Ohio State. Great footwork, great overall football demeanor, and I think he's great for the run game. But the Packers lost Lindsey this year. I think that's another reason why Aaron Rodgers is upset. They lost their star center in Corey Linsley, and I don't think Josh Myers is going to be anywhere close to that good for quite some time, at least. But at least they got the pick. The Chiefs added a center in Creed Humphrey. They still needed some O-line help. They've added some tools through free agency, but just adding a center to kind of shore up that inside of that offensive line I think is huge. And then the last pick of the second round, the Buccaneers drafted Kyle Trask. I think this is just a great spot to be in. He will have 2 to 5 years. Who knows how long Tom Brady is still going to play? Probably 10 years for all we know, to just learn behind the greatest quarterback of all time. And I think that'll be invaluable. Like, the lessons he'll learn, the subtle cues he'll pick up just from sitting behind Tom Brady, I think will be huge. And Kyle Trask ends up in a great situation on a Super Bowl team in Tampa Bay. And I thought this was a great fit for Trask. Some of my favorite later round picks in the third round, the Vikings grabbed Kellen Mond, who I thought somewhat fell. I thought he would be in the second round. Davis Mills went after him to Houston. Again, a guy with a lot of potential, but it's going to take time. The Panthers, they drafted Brady Christensen in the third round. I thought that was a big pick, getting the BYU offensive lineman. Washington, this was one of my favorite later round picks. They added De'Ami Brown. Chris Sims, NFL analyst, had him as his third total best wide receiver in the draft, so I'm really surprised he made it this far, and just watching his tape, it's pretty crazy that he did make it this far, considering where the Seahawks and the Rams went with their picks at wide receiver. Trey Sermon from San Fran is another great pick. I think will complement the San Francisco running backs really well. And then there were some 4th to 7th round snags that I thought were pretty good picks. The Panthers grabbed Chuba Hubbard from OK State in the 4th, the running back. The Ravens got Shaun Wade, who, if he entered the draft last year, I think a lot of people thought he was going to be a first-round pick, and then just did not play well in 2020 for Ohio State. So he fell all the way to the round 5, which is pretty crazy, but he got exposed last season to some extent. Pittsburgh got Wisconsin defensive tackle Isaiah Loudermilk at 5. I thought that was a great pick. I watched Isaiah Loudermilk a lot in college. He's a guy who's always around the quarterback, always making plays, and always kind of just taking up space on that D-line. The Bears added 2 more good picks in the 6th round with Daz Newsome and Khalil Herbert. I watched a lot of Khalil Herbert this year, just being a Virginia Tech fan. He's got that one-cut speed. Will be able to return kicks, and then Daz Newsome as well. Another guy that will help with special teams because he is a great punt returner, has a lot of dynamic playmaking ability, and I watched him just completely ball out against Virginia Tech this year for North Carolina. And then Mr. Irrelevant went to the Houston Texans in Grant Stewart. Always fun to see. I think that's a mean name to call the last pick of the NFL draft, but oh well. Mr. Irrelevant, that's what they call it. So that really wraps up my final draft coverage for the 2021 NFL Draft. I will get into some more draft grades next episode. Kind of talk more about where these teams are at, but the offseason's coming, and OTAs are going to start soon. Rookie camp's going to start soon, so things will start picking up. Storylines will start developing, and we have to keep an eye on the entire Aaron Rodgers situation because who knows what is going to happen there. As always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. I hope you all have a great week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.